This video contains themes and subjects that some people may find distressing. Before this video begins, a quick word on where we are. Terezín, also known as Theresienstadt, was a former military fortress in the Czech Republic that the Nazis turned into a ghetto and transit camp during World War II. Tens of thousands of Jews were imprisoned here. Many later departed to extermination camps. While the Nazis used it for propaganda, the reality was one of suffering, overcrowding and death. This place holds deep historical weight, and it's important we remember what happened here. Hello, so it could be a completely different video for me. Me and Wanda are at Terezín concentration camp in Czech Republic. We're going to take you on a tour of the concentration camp, the last liberated concentration camp of the Second World War. Obviously, some of the scenes and themes you may find distressing, so feel free to either watch, skip, but yeah, I thought, as it's being here, such a big part of the world that how it shaped the world, the Second World War, and the plight of people that are at these concentration camps. I thought I'd show you as much as I can. Hope you enjoyed the video. We start at Terezin's small fortress, once a military stronghold, later a Nazi prison. Behind its walls, thousands suffered under brutal conditions. This is a place where history whispers through every corridor, a stark reminder of the human cost of hatred and war. Yeah, I'm going to film. So we're at Terezín. Yeah. So these are all the graves. Quite eerie and scary, really. I don't know. There'll probably be some information on how many there actually are. It just said there's 30,000 people buried here. Wow.
30,000 here.
Yeah.
Listed.
Yeah.
By the crematorium, there's another 30,000.
Wow.
And that's just listed. So
Wow. So how many without that haven't been listed? Yeah, say some unnamed. Quite a few unnamed. Oh, the names are stolen, Wanda. Goes on forever. We're coming up to the small fortress, I believe.
in the ghetto, the three were condemned. Thank you for coming.
The meanest of the mean.
Condemned in the end.
Comandanti cattivi, poi c'erano due più o meno hanno aiutato un po' questi comunicatori so the two here sometimes would help. So see, the golem, did you hear the story of the golem, 16th century? There you see him, he was 2 meters high, made of clay, to protect the Jewish community in the 16th century, made by Rabbin Yehud Oliva ben Betzalel, Rabbin Löber.
So those three are called the meanest of the mean.
Had a baby with one.
They escaped to Germany.
The legend says. She wanted to have
They were caught by the Americans and hanged.
Things which happened here during the Second World War. That's obvious. But before that, I just wanted to introduce Terezin shortly, because basically nothing here was built by the Nazis. Terezin, it's an old fortress from the 18th century, 1790 to be exact. It has got two parts, important part. Two parts. We are going to walk together through this small fortress. Logically, if there is a small fortress, there is a big one too. So 1 kilometer away from here, there is the main fortress, you know, and inside of it, they constructed a garrison town, military base type of town, you know, all that in 1790. Fortress was supposed to protect this country and the whole Habsburg Empire, of which we were part of, against our own neighbors, against the Prussians. We are very close to the German border, okay? However, no one ever attacked the fortress. No one, either the Prussians, no one else. There was never any kind of battle or fight taking place, and this fortress became too old-fashioned very quickly. Instead, this small fortress, throughout the years, they started to use it as a prison, 19th century, okay? Nazis changed it all, because Nazis, basically, they established here two different camps. Since I'm going to tell you all about this one, shortly about the other camp in the main fortress, in that actual town. You know, Nazis established there the so-called Ghetto Theresienstadt, Terezin Ghetto, which served 4 years as a transit concentration camp for thousands of Jewish people from Central Europe. There were Jewish prisoners from this country, Germany, Austria, Holland, Denmark. They were all brought to Terezin with one purpose, and that was not to stay. As the transports were arriving, they were leaving too. The main destination was called Auschwitz-Birkenau. About that topic, we have museum in the town. I suppose you all will visit it. If you arrive from Prague organized, you will continue your tour over there as your own guide. If you are here individually, of course, there is a museum which you can visit. It's part of the visit of Terezin. I will be speaking about the small fortress more. Okay? It was in the hands of Gestapo, the small fortress, which means during the war, most of the prisoners here were political prisoners, Nazis, opponents, you know. There were gypsies too, homosexuals. There were prisoners of war, soldiers from many different countries, and finally, Jewish prisoners too, from the other part. If they broke the rules over there, they were transferred to the small fortress as punishment. 32,000 people passed through the gate of the small fortress. Many of them died here, and many more once they got deported to bigger concentration camps, because this was a transit too. Okay. We will be spending most of our time behind that gate, one of the quarters for the prisoners. There were three. About that sign, Arbeit, Macht, Frei. Work makes you free. This was the first thing prisoners saw when they were brought here, because this is where it started. Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, was a sign typical for the main entrances to almost all concentration camps. It's very absurd, because if people went
This was the office of the German commander. So this was basically a processing area. And they came in and they were moved through, given all their bits and pieces, given their clothes, and then they were moved off.
adult people, adult prisoners. However, in the Jewish ghetto, that's where they deported the whole families to. After the arrival, families got separated. The children got separated, you know. Contact was usually forbidden. So about this part over here, if you look around you, the building which surrounds it, that's the old fortress. Later on, used as a prison. Nazis didn't change anything here, almost anything, but all those inscriptions are from the Second World War. So suddenly this became Block A, you know, Block B around the corner, other things, Hofverwaltung, court administration, and so on and so on. But obviously, there are prisoner cells all around us. There are 16 of those big cells and some isolation cells. But before we go inside, have a look. I just wanted to describe one day in the life of a prisoner in the small fortress. Day started early, if necessary at 4 o'clock in the morning, or 5. There was a wake-up call. The bell is still hanging there. So to get prisoners up, the bell was ringing. Food was brought around into each cell. They brought piece of bread for each person, sometimes piece of margarine, something like a butter, and to drink something which reminded coffee. Prisoners called it black water. So that was for breakfast. 1 hour later, they heard the bell for the second time. That was already sign for appel, roll call, everyone out. About 1,500 men who were here had to get out. You see, during the war, each cell would have one prisoner responsible for it. They were called the capos. And these capos did the reporting. How many dead, how many ill, how many prisoners able to work. Everything was registered. Then prisoners were split into different groups, and there was work for everyone. I will be speaking about work later. Whole day. In the evening, again roll call. If numbers were matching, they could go back inside. And in the evening to eat, it was always the same thing. Again, some kind of soup, mostly with vegetables only. Okay? So that was a day. But all those days were the same, every day, until these prisoners got transferred somewhere else. Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen, Sachsenhausen, and so on and so on. Okay. So let's go have a look inside. one of these 16 cells. Anyways, they were all the same, all identical, okay?
These are all the cells, there's 16 cells. What? Wow. Yeah, scary. Now we can blockade then.
As the number of prisoners was getting higher and higher, the level of hygiene conditions was dropping. So the things we don't see are these insects, parasites. It was everywhere.
Saying 100 people to one toilet.
Birds are nesting here, and sometimes they fly very low. You will see. You will see. If you get a little present on your clothes, it brings luck. Okay, seriously now, about this building. These are isolation cells, solitary confinements. 19th century, again. I would like to mention one person who was brought as a prisoner here in 1914. 1914. Cell number 1, you will see. His name was Gavrilo Princip. He was a young Serbian student, 18 years old. He was the one who shot the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy in Sarajevo, June 1914. Franz Ferdinand d'Este and his wife were killed in Sarajevo, shot dead. And this Sarajevo assassination was the very beginning of the First World War. So the person responsible for that was called Gavrilo Princip. His sentence was 20 years. In Terezín, he survived 4 before he died of officially bone tuberculosis. Okay? But back to World War II, Second World War, Nazis. Of course they used these cells, very often, always, for prisoners under interrogation, which meant complete isolation even during several months. And if I say interrogation, I mean torture, you know. They used it for prisoners to get punished for anything they could done wrong in the eyes of the guards. Couple of days, there it was, feeding the babies. Couple of days inside with no food was the usual punishment for anything. And finally, they would use it for prisoners who were kept here before they got executed, and we will go and see the execution place later. So we will use the exit, which is over there. It gives you possibility to have a look around. But just imagine that all the little windows were closed, so it would be pitch dark. And there was nothing inside, no bed, no toilet, you know. So, and it could take a few days, but it could also take several months. Almost half of the prisoners didn't survive the imprisonment in this part of the small fortress. Okay. So, feel free to have. Babies. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so the windows will be open.
There are some.
Here, not here, next door, what it used to be a shop, we'll go there. This room, they usually called it in the camps here too, the housing station. You know, lice. But back then, it was not only the head lice, but body lice. These were dangerous things, because these body lice, they spread typhus. And typhus was deadly, and typhus didn't choose if a person was a prisoner or a guard. In 1943, the situation here was critical with all the ill prisoners. It became too dangerous for the Nazis, you know, and that's why the decision was made to build this. 1943, after 3 years. So how was it working? Well, simply, a day was chosen, and that day all prisoners had to pass through here. You know, so since there were several thousands of prisoners, it took the whole day. In the morning, they stayed locked up inside their work, and the guards would start simply with sewn up a lock. They would open it, they brought everyone here, so let's say 80 to 100 people. They got undressed here, and you see this equipment that was full of clothes. Underwear, trousers, jackets, you know. Sometimes they used chemicals, not always, but once it was closed, it was, I say always, cheap, efficient, quick. Basically, it took only 3 minutes because they steamed it. Hot steam, very efficient. So, like this, the parasites were killed. In the meantime, that's the time prisoners had to take shower over there. Once the clothes was done, they left, you will go there, they will get it back, and the next group was coming. I would like to mention some problems. First of all, warm water, only at the very beginning, and because first women had mostly warm water, not always, but mostly. The rest of the prisoners, absolute majority were men, they had only cold water. Second problem is the clothes. It was not washed, it was steamed. So if you can imagine in what state the clothes would be. They were working very hard outside in mud and everything. Underwear, prisoners were ill. They had diarrhea because of the bad food, you know. Big problem. Third thing, the clothes was wet. Steam makes everything wet. Wet clothes, especially during winter time. You know. How often did they do it? Usually once a week. But sometimes it was closed here simply because there was no water. So let's have a look. We will use the exit, which is over there. You can have a look around the shower, the room is behind.
The shower. I'm behind you.
Sick room. So one was here for the men, the other one was in the other part where women were staying. That one was much smaller, about a half of its size here. And here, we know, originally there was 8 places, 8 beds. You know, we only have 4 now. About the medical care. Well, first of all, you saw that little office there for the doctor. It was the official small fortress doctor. He was a civilian German doctor who came from a little town nearby twice a week. He was responsible for the medical care, but on daily basis, there were other prisoners who were playing the role of a doctor. Even though these prisoners, these doctors, they tried their best, they couldn't help everyone because there was simply nothing to treat the ill prisoners with. And you see, this was not for everyone, because logically there are always more ill prisoners. They were left inside the cells while others were working. You know, these prisoners stayed inside, the doctors were seeing them. That was a danger too, ill person among the others. There were many epidemics, you know. Into this sick room, they would deplace, for example, prisoners with some contagious disease, dangerous disease, or prisoners they needed, and they would be treated. Why would they need some prisoners? Either because of the information they could provide, or because of their skills. And now we are getting to that part of work. I will speak a little bit more generally now also, because prisoners from concentration camps, but from here too, they were a source of money for the Nazis. That was, to use contemporary vocabulary, that was the business. Nazis were sending prisoners to work to the factories owned by private companies, and these companies would pay the camps. That's how it worked. That's how millions were made. So you see, in each camp here too, there were always some prisoners who were working inside. There were reparations to make, there was kitchen, they were cleaning, you know, stuff like that. For example, women in the small fortress, they were also repairing uniforms for the German army, that Macht, okay? But most of the prisoners really worked in the surrounding area. It could be in agriculture, of course. It could be in the forests, you know, train stations. They needed muscles, but they needed also skilled prisoners. The factories, specialized factories. Here, prisoners worked, for example, in the underground factory, and they were producing parts of engines for German tanks. So, at one side, they needed muscles. These prisoners, if they became too ill, they could be replaced easily. But they needed skilled personnel, engineers, specialists. If they were ill, and there was no one else to replace them, they would be treated with preference. Okay, is it clear now what I'm talking about? Am I making sense? Okay. The mortality in Terezín was high, and that's why decision was made to build crematorium, and all the dead bodies were cremated. Okay? The ashes, basically they were destroyed. They were thrown into a river which streams in between these two fortresses. That big cemetery outside, it exists from the end of the war. Many people at the end of the war died here of typhus. There was a huge epidemic. They kept dying, the survivors, even after the war. And they are buried outside on that big cemetery. Plus, they found some mass graves after the war, and the victims from the mass graves are buried too. About 10,000 victims are buried on that cemetery. Total number of people who died in Terezín, it's almost 40,000. Okay. We have one more room left, and then we will go and visit other part.
Sick bay. "40,000 people died here. Mad."
Number would be given to them. Okay? But there was only one camp where they were actually tattooing the prisoners with that number, and that was Auschwitz. But to make it more complicated, not everyone who was brought to Auschwitz was tattooed, no. Only that small percentage of people who were chosen there to work. Others were not tattooed. Number of people who passed through Auschwitz, 1,250,000. Number of survivors, 100,000. Okay? In other camps, no tattoos, but the numbers were always on the clothes. Okay? Either here or on the back. That's some additional information for you. Okay? About this one. It didn't look like this almost the whole war. It was just another regular mass sub for 100 people. Capacity 100, same wooden furniture, one toilet over there, no difference. Until 1944. Then it became this, what you can see. The official name for this room was Rasierstube, shaving room. So, the mirrors and everything you see, it's from 1944. There is one problem though. This shaving room was not built here for the prisoners, but because the Red Cross was supposed to come for inspection here. So there were a couple of things arranged and prepared for the Red Cross. This room was supposed to be the ultimate proof of good care, you know, for the prisoners, good level of hygiene. The thing is, the Red Cross never visited the small fortress, and this door never opened for anyone. It stayed locked. It was not allowed to use this room. As simple as that. So all you see is original, never used. About the Red Cross visit, they did visit Terezín, but not this part, the ghetto. And in the Ghetto Museum, we have a big part dedicated to this fake introduction of Terezín to the International Red Cross delegation, because Nazis misused Terezín for their own propaganda to prove to the whole world that the rumors about the existence of the gas chambers were not true. So in the Ghetto Museum, you can even see the original photographs made by the Red Cross, you know, in Terezín. It was a big success, by the way, for the Nazis, this visit of the Red Cross. Took place in June 1944. Okay? So we will continue now to see another part. We will go to the left side.
So the lady was saying this room was never used. It was built to make the Nazis look like they were keeping people really well when they weren't. Mad.
Gate, which would be locked during the war. Prisoners were not really allowed to come here unless they had some work to do, obviously. Like the group of prisoners in camps, they were called Leichenkommando, prisoners who collected the dead bodies, brought them to the morgues, and then they were brought to Crematorium. There were two morgues over here, the left side and on the right side, okay? But we are here for another reason. Next part of our tour, it has got no connection with the Nazis. It's a corridor, right there in the middle. Look, guards during the war, they were so afraid that prisoners could escape through it, that they blocked it. It was even walled up, no one could enter. It was not used. So back to the 18th century, when the fortress was built. You know, as a part of its defense system, there were moats all around. One is behind me. And there were these corridors. So these corridors, you don't see them, but they are all around, they surround the fortress. In case of an attack by an enemy, the soldiers here, they could use it to displace themselves efficiently, quickly, without being seen, defend the fortress, you know, it connects different parts. They could escape from here. There are even dormitories inside, you know. There were storages for gunpowder. There were dead-end corridors just to confuse the enemies if they would get inside. Complicated system of almost 50 kilometers of corridors. And we have a passage here, which is a typical example of a defense corridor. It's 500 meters long. It takes about 5 minutes to walk through it. If we take it, we can get close to that execution place I mentioned, which Nazis used. They just didn't use this to get that. Okay, it's at least this high, at least. Wide enough. There is light put inside. But I can understand if someone doesn't want to go through the corridor, there is a possibility to walk around, obviously, the same distance. But you must tell me. So, we will do it like that. I will ask those most brave.
This is the morgue. Wallet. So this is one of the tunnels.
Hier geht es noch weiter.
Still going. We've walked for a good 5 minutes now. 500 metres long this tunnel. Just coming to the end now. You made it, Wanda. Bright lights. Yeah, sorry about that.
Soldiers were practicing shooting, exercising shooting, you know. Targets were usually fixed up on that wall, that's why it's so damaged. And the soldiers were under that roof. If you wonder what those things on the ground are, they call it laying down position for a soldier. You know, like that with a weapon. But during World War II, they started to execute the prisoners here. Most of them were probably executed by shooting. The spot with that little tree, it's a spot where a prisoner had to stand up. And this is where the guards were, you know, right in the middle. That was the distance. The very last execution took place here on May 2nd, 1945. Basically, it was a day when it was all decided. War was over because the Red Army took over Berlin. May 2nd. Here, the Nazis were still continuing. You know, the interesting information for you maybe is that Terezín was the very last concentration camp liberated. All the others were liberated before, and it was a geographical question because this country was in the middle. As the East Front, the Red Army was liberating camps in Poland, the Allies in Germany and Austria, and this country was in the middle. So while other camps were liberated, here it was still going on. As a result of liberation of all these other camps, what would happen to the prisoners in these other camps before liberation? Nazis either killed all the remaining people there, or these people were sent to the camps which were not liberated yet by evacuation transport or by the very sadly known death marches. And that's why, at the end of the war, about 15,000 mixed prisoners from everywhere streamed to Terezín. They brought the typhus with them, you know. At the end of the war, Terezín was crowded. Anyways, the last execution here, May 2nd, 1945. 3 days later, it was over. Guards escaped. One of the morgues was here too. It was right there. And if you wonder about that gallows, the only information available about that is that 3 Polish prisoners of war were hanged there because they tried to organize escaping. So that's all we know. Now we can walk back. Because
These are like practice sniper positions. And then, as the lady was saying, yeah, so that's a morgue up on this hill. This is where they'd be lined up to be shot. They've got a gallows. Wow.
this is where the commander and 10 other, the highest guards, the most important guards were living. And if these men were married, their families too, wives and children. Basically, this was the quarter for the SS because there is another building hiding behind the trees, and that's where soldiers of the SS were staying. Minimum 100, maximum number 400. 400 soldiers, okay? And this area was only for them. That's why prisoners had to build a swimming pool, 1942, no? That's why prisoners had to build a cinema inside this building. So cinema and swimming pool. At the entrance, we have a little souvenir shop. That is still the original restaurant from the World War II, also for the Nazis. Okay, it was the canteen. They called it casino. Okay. So all these guards, they escaped on May 5th, 1945. After the war, they were all captured. Among the first ones was the commander himself, 1946, sentenced to death as a war criminal in the same year, 1946. So they found them continuously throughout the years. The last one discovered in 2001. He was 94 years old. Before the trial started, he died. Okay, that was the last guard. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the official end of the tour. Look, if you are here individually, feel free to have a look.
This is the commander's house. That's how they lived okay though, wasn't it? That's the commander's house. Wow. A short bus ride takes us to the crematorium, and this stands as a stark reminder of the horrors of the Holocaust, where thousands of lives lost in the ghetto and nearby camps were reduced to ashes. It's not just a structure, it's a symbol of systematic dehumanisation and the industrial scale of the Nazi atrocities. So this was gifted to Terezin by Israel, a stone in the shape of a human heart. So this is a crematorium. So it's a short bus ride from the small fortress over to here.
Jewish community, the religion about apples.
Right.
According to list of the Nazis, in fact they were writing every single document 3 times. They've been very systematic, the Nazis. And everywhere you see the little stones,
Goes on forever. Different countries. So Belgium, Danish, French, Dutch. Italian. Yugoslavian. Luxembourg. Hungary. Hungary. Norwegian. Norway. Ireland. Austria.
Romania and then SSSR. So this is all you needed to see. I know that only one train was not paid to Deutsche Bahn. It was the train which came come pane Asimov, come pane Maca o Maceva le Pietre. Prima vedremo qui il laboratorio, venga, dove I corpi erano aperti. So first you see the laboratory where bodies were opened. You've seen Schindler's List? Yes. When the Fennies would swallow a diamond and a piece of bread. Then Nazis were looking for the gems in the trays and for golden teeth. And whenever there were too many people, the dead were waiting here in the room on your right. So please circulate right on the right. Go and see.
The bodies in that were stored, I think, or the parts.
A system of additional ventilation so that every single body would be burned within 20 minutes.
Every body would burn in 20 minutes.
From the lower part of the furnace. Place boxes, first wood boxes, then paper boxes on it. Additional ventilation, ashes taken below, all furnaces, 4 to 8 employees for the shift. Very much Jonathan, the doctor of all professors at the level of
Harrowing.
What happened to 22,000 boxes with ashes? A group of children take the boxes from Columbary. Then another group of children comes and goes with the cart to the river. So here you can see it. And Litoměřice, which does not exist anymore, like Meritz in Germany. Every single village would have a German name because they were here ruling the Habsburgs from Vienna. The only Habsburg who lived in Prague was Rudolf II in the 16th century. And this man was very interesting, inviting Johannes Kepler, Tycho Brahe from Denmark, also the best artists, alchemists, astronomers, mathematicians, all knowing books by the Polish. I forgot. And Rudolf II died in Prague 1612 in January on syphilis. So in the end of his life he was really stupid. No one could see his art collections. So this is the center of the church and fortified. Every single house was a military barrack. Children were also dispersed in many of these barracks. Some of them were filled with Gestapo soldiers and SS soldiers. A sad story. Here the Russian cemetery is also mentioned. And again, you see here the name of Auschwitz, and there was the last railway station, where the Jews had to get off the trains, and they would walk 3 kilometers with their luggage, 50 kilo for each. So that was life of the Jews here. Of course, the old and children were expensive to feed. They would be killed, sent to extermination. That was the façade, as you see.
Okay, so,
Too expensive to feed.
Yeah.
It was sent to extermination.
yeah, so yeah, children were too expensive to feed. So they're sent off to be executed. Yeah. Yeah. This is the Russian.
I'm in the shadow now. The shadow, yeah, there's twinkling lights.
Sorry.
Symbolises permanence of their memories.
So Wanda's just googled what these little stones are on some of these graves, and apparently it's a sign that these graves have been visited.
It's practice in Jewish mourning, and the stones are an act of they're not forgotten as they don't decay like flowers.
That's really nice, actually.
Yeah. So each one looks like they've all been visited at some point,
Yeah. Wow.
and every time they visit, they put a pebble on.
Wow. It's
That's
quite
quite a nice, respectful thing to do.
very humbling in there. Very humbling.
Freaky deaky in there.
The last stop on the tour is the Terezin Ghetto Museum, which tells the haunting story of a Nazi transit camp disguised as a model Jewish settlement. Through drawings, diaries and personal items, it reveals the resilience of those imprisoned and the lies used to mask genocide.
We are now here in the city. There is the river and the small fortress, the Gestapo prison. Only there is something villages. Okay? Let us see the names of children. You'll see only one day. Name of birth. Disappeared, assimilating with Assyria, Egyptians, others.
Names of children.
Blumenheim. These are beautiful names, mostly German, because Maria Teresa insisted that all the Jews take a new name on the base of German language. Tutto comincia con la lettera A, dedicato ai bambini.
Yeah.
Da 0 a 15 anni. Poets. How many Hoffmans? Great people Hoffmans. And of the fourth, right? All Prince Ivan, who wrote the diary. You saw the book? Terezín was the leader, the main editor of the newspaper publishing in the school every week. Sometimes the articles were written by hand, sometimes in the machine, typing machine. So many crowds. Laughs, like someone, the fish, laughs. In German language.
Look at this hall over here.
Even Rosenthal, you know Rosenthal, and 4 children of the Rothschild family. They did not escape in time, Rothschild even.
The majority of these young artists were annihilated.
So at least there is a memorial to 10,000 children killed because the Nazis were not ready to feed them.
10,000 children, because they wouldn't feed them. This wall is astonishing. Killed because they were expensive to feed.
Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. There we have the restaurant before we leave this place. But now, kindly follow me, you'll see the first floor.
That's what they remembered when they were
There we have.
It's the fact that they were executed and murdered because they were expensive to feed. Just astonishing. I'll take these more pictures of the kids.
from the family.
I assume so.
Got killed as well then.
I just wiped out everybody, didn't they?
Nuremberg, 3 generations had to be under scrutiny. And the night of November, when Frei a trip to Palestine, which was under control of British. They could not get off the boats, right? Jews came from extermination camps from the north, Riga, Majdanek, Treblinka. All these prisoners came to Terezín. Then it was overcrowded and the disease started to kill. There you see a photograph of Adolf Eichmann, caught by Mossad in '61, brought back to Israel for justice. He was hiding first here in our country.
they entered the prison, what date they died. One of them only survived 1 or 2 days.
Wow.
That's just 2 pages from a journal. That one was the same day.
Yeah.
That was the same day.
Same day. Crazy, isn't it?
You can see my grandfather invited a couple just coming back from Theresienstadt, and they lived in her family house. She thought it would be for 1 month, maybe, till they recover, eat and sleep and forget. No, they would remain for 20 years. Why? Because the beautiful Jewish house were confiscated first by the Nazi, and then who would live there in beautiful apartments? The communists. Because Stalin liberated the country. So they had no place to go. So the couple was living there for 20 years.
So much to show. I can't show everything, obviously. Nearly a quarter of all inmates died.
In ogni città, per ogni ebreo che prima ha viaggiato in tutta Europa, perché c'è la diaspora, vero? So you can see with another trick created by the Nazi.
These
The letter J in the passport.
they had a
This woman was another prisoner.
Yeah, they had a J.
they'd have a J.
Yeah.
Stop them later on.
So it's basically confined them.
J.
She came here as a small girl,
Another trick to find
and she survived.
Wow.
You can see
labelled them.
there are many interesting programs here. A lot of culture was offered every Friday to the people in the ghetto, organized by themselves, and sport, and also cabaret. You can imagine many homosexuals would come from Paris, from Vienna, from Berlin, to organize funny performance, cabaret. Now, I think tonight you'll see cabaret with Liza Minnelli. You'll see the film Cabaret. So this was an exemplary cabaret, and people were laughing, people were very happy. And thanks to a rich cultural life, many people could survive. But you know what? The main offense was to be naked. This was the worst thing to happen to anyone, to be naked. Then you can see Jewish items came here, Torah, Parochet, Kaporet, Aron HaKodesh would be built so that the Jews could go and pray like in a synagogue. It was tolerated. Till the moment when all people had to go to other extermination camps. Auschwitz was opened October 42, relatively very late.
Very nice little prisoner. Look.
There is an aerial photo of Auschwitz, Oswiecim, and there are two more concentration camps called Brzezinka, Birkenau. So 5 concentration camps were opened next to Crematorium. October 42. All mathematicians, astronomers would know the name of Copernicus in the 16th century. And here we are. Is the map you can make a photograph? The green countries are the neutral countries. Hungary Nazi, Slovakia Nazi, Austria, Russia, Germany, very difficult. Belgium, Holland,
Other concentration camps here, and the subsidiaries also took advantage of the slave labour for prisoners. The SS doctors at Auschwitz deemed fit to work.
These were sent to Auschwitz.
See what, sorry?
It's just part of the list of prisoners.
Including foreign members transported to Auschwitz.
very close to our border was possible. Ravensbrück was only for women. So this is quite interesting map to see. The Vichy government of France. There is somewhere here also the Drancy, another concentration camp was there. We have two Swiss people here, a French people. And then you see trains from Terezín to other extermination camps. The first was Riga. Rakowsko is again Austria, Holland, Hungary.
So here's a map of Terezin. So you've got a small fortress over here, which is where we started at. And then you've got the whole fortified city. Which is fantastic that it's actually still like, well, it's not fantastic obviously, but still like that.
Items you can see during your private visit, the Gestapo prison and the city. We've been here. That the criminal acts caused by the communist regime. When Stalin liberated our country, the communist regime started, right? Finished after 41 years. Communist regime was here. You know. All Czech people had to come to move away from here. They would get a new address. Before Hitler moved here, the Jewish people.
Terezin held over 140,000 Jews. Nearly 90,000 were deported to extermination camps. Over 33,000 died within its walls from starvation, disease and despair. Among them were over 15,000 children. Fewer than 150 survived. They drew pictures, wrote poems, clung to hope in the darkest of places. Their voices still echo through the museum walls, reminding us what was taken and what must never be forgotten. Terrorism was never just a ghetto. It was a lie built on suffering, a waiting room for death. Behind every number was a name, a face, a stolen life. Remember them, speak for them, because silence is how it started.